So I will just go ahead and begin. So hi everyone and welcome to this edition of Plandek's Masterclass series. I'm Harneet from the Customer Success team here at Plandek, and I'm looking forward to talking you through today's session on quality metrics. It's all about how we define them, how we measure them, and also, most importantly, how we use them to improve the engineering outcomes and unlock high-performing teams. Now, this webinar is part of our 4-part masterclass series, where we divide up the 4 pillars of our productivity framework. Now, if the productivity framework is not something you've seen before, I'll definitely go through it in a few minutes. But this session itself isn't kind of about tracking bugs or testing more. It's all about understanding how we embed quality thinking into the ways we work every day, so we can move faster, reduce risk, and also build better products. Now, before I dive straight in, we do have a poll to launch, so just give me a couple of minutes to set that up. Now, this poll is for everyone on the call to use, but particularly for those who are interested in getting involved and finding out more about Plandek as a whole. And so, right now we're running a no obligations free trial for teams who are interested in getting to know the product yourselves, jumping in and having a feel for it. And later on in this session as well, I'll be going through a quick demo of how we set up some of the quality metrics. So do stay for that section. So let me just take a minute to begin the poll. Okay, so that should be launched for you now. You should be able to use that, and we will be definitely in touch for those of you who've filled in the poll. Amazing. So moving on now, so we spoke a bit about the productivity framework, or I mentioned it briefly. So over the past around 7 to 8 months, we at Plandek have been thinking about how we measure productivity in software engineering. Now, it also gets compared, or often gets compared, to car manufacturing, but it's not as easy as just counting the number of cars at the end of a production line, and you really can't see that waste on the shelves. So how do you go about it? And so what we've done at Plandek, after a lot of research and understanding how our clients work, we've developed a framework to measure engineering productivity through 4 core pillars. So this is speed, predictability, quality, and focus. So speed is all about, how fast are you delivering and how efficient your workflow is. Think of things like cycle time, lead time metrics, and also how do we start reducing the wasted time in that process. Predictability is less about predicting your teams, but whether or not your teams are planning as delivered or delivering as planned. So let's say you're a team lead and your team can comfortably deliver about 50 story points a sprint. That gives you the confidence to then say whether or not you can take on more work during the sprint. And so it just sets a better expectation for your teams, but also for leadership as well. And just gives them the confidence that the teams will be executing what they've planned to do. And so when we look at focus, then the 3rd pillar, it reflects whether your engineering efforts are aligned with the business priorities. So whether teams are focused on the roadmap works, or actually are they getting distracted by other unplanned works of things like bugs, defects that kind of come unexpected. And finally, today's focus, of course, is on quality. So this is all about the stability and reliability of the work that's being delivered. And so even though we are focusing on quality today, we do want to keep in mind the broader system in which this sits, and to look at how teams are delivering more holistically, because these pillars don't stand alone. If quality starts to drop, then speed can suffer. So if there's more bugs, more issues, teams have less time to spend on actual value add pieces of work. And for example, if focus is poor, we can be really busy, but are we delivering the right things? And are we having the impact on the environment that we want? So it's those kind of trade-offs that hopefully these 4 pillars try to capture holistically and help support that better data-driven decision-making for your teams and also for your leadership. So we go to the next slide. This is a view of the metrics that we use under each of these pillars. So like I said, software engineering productivity can be quite complex to measure, but we've tried to break this down into kind of a nice, neat structure for you guys, and also give a view so that each of these pillars have multiple metrics that capture different aspects of what it means to, working with focus, what it means to be working with speed, etc. And so for today's session, we'll be focusing on the right-hand side, which is the 3 quality metrics. So we've got here bug resolution time, stories delivered to bugs raised ratio, bugs resolved to bugs raised ratio as well. And I'll be talking through what these metrics are, why we should measure them, and also how do we do that on Plandek as a tool. And so I'll give you that demo of how to build that up, whether you're an existing customer or whether you're interested in finding out more about the tool. So each of these essentially give you a piece of the puzzle to build that full story of how your delivery teams are running. And so it exposes those kind of hidden risks or, catches those trends early in your data. And it helps you get a better kind of idea of where to target improvement efforts, so that you can kind of reinforce that better agile practice into your day-to-day working. So now just a bit on quality itself. So why is quality important? Why does it matter? And why should we have this as our key focus? So for us in today's kind of fast-moving environment of delivery, quality is really fundamental to when we're looking at kind of a team's productivity. So normally people kind of look at things like speed and focus, but without that quality there is not much of a benefit to have very fast delivery, for example. And so having that poor quality actually means there's more rework, less confidence in deployments, and can also start to erode that trust from stakeholders or from customers if there's kind of constant bugs that they're seeing, or if work is constantly being pulled back to be reviewed and refreshed. So we do know that it's about the customers and the end users who see the improvement in quality, but it's the one thing that we want people to measure it for is really for your developer teams and providing them an environment in which they can enable and be high performing in. So when teams start to track quality effectively, they get a better early visibility into risks. And so we can catch problems before they actually become blockers and actually become kind of bugs into the system. And building these practices into your day-to-day work can reduce that costly rework when you have to go back to fix bugs or back to fix issues down the line. And if developers kind of have less bugs and issues to focus on, it means that they're more focused on those key roadmap activities and the value add work. And so ultimately, it just means the teams have less distractions and can focus better. With the teams working more efficiently now, they can build that trust with their kind of broader business and customer base as well. And this just provides them a competitive advantage in the market because we can get the more value add work out faster, and we can increase that feedback loop from users. So we can regularly iterate and build kind of better products for the end kind of users and the use case. So this builds kind of a nice environment for engineers, not only just kind of on the day-to-day processes and working, but also from a morale perspective. So they start to take pride in the stability and the reliability of their own work. Okay, now just quickly jumping into the first of the 3 metrics we spoke about in terms of quality. So bug resolution time. This metric essentially reflects the time it takes to resolve a known bug from the moment it's been raised in the system all the way through deployment into production. Now at Plandek, we see the top performing teams have a bug resolution time of around 10 days. So these numbers on the left-hand side are part of our kind of benchmarking, and this has been done based on around 1,800 plus of our client teams. And so it gives an idea of, what does good look like when we're talking about bug resolution time, but also some of our other metrics as part of the 4 pillars. And so what we see is 10 days is of a high performing team or anything less than that. So on the surface, of course, it's benefiting the end users, but it does have a direct correlation with the engineering delivery and effort. So that's kind of what makes it super important to track. Usually when bugs sit in the backlog for too long, engineers have to spend way more time triaging, retesting, and context switching just to get those bugs resolved. So you can imagine when a bug's kind of been sat there for quite a while, the code base may have progressed since then. The engineers have been working on separate pieces, and that time taken to kind of almost reframe what the bug was about and almost apply it to the current environment actually can be considered as a bit of wasted time, just because it means there's less time going into things like building new features, client priorities, and even kind of planned tech debt work, which would have been on the roadmap. In a minute, I will show you how to kind of build this bug resolution time metric to identify certain bottlenecks in the workflow as well when we go into the actual product. But one thing I just wanted to call out is a slight watch out and a slight trap that teams can typically fall into. Now, when you're looking at resolving bugs, sometimes teams end up cherry picking easy bugs to resolve. And so what this does is it makes the bug resolution time metric look quite good on the dashboard, and it artificially kind of improves the metric. But what happens in the background is there is a growing backlog of the more harder, of the more complex bugs that is being ignored. And so these bugs would only get trickier over time to resolve. So what you want to do is start to kind of avoid cherry picking certain bugs, making sure high priority and complex bugs are getting addressed in a timely manner as well. And so that's why we recommend not just looking at bug resolution time, but also coupling it with some of our other metrics that talk to kind of the backlog volume, just to make sure your teams aren't just moving fast and quickly, but they're focused on the actual right things and mitigating risks early. So just on that point, we've got the next metric for stories delivered to bugs raised ratio. Now, this is a good kind of correlation between two metrics that we can see. So the number of stories delivered and then the number of bugs raised. And this relationship essentially highlights what are we delivering. So when the new stories, features, improvements come out, are these changes actually impacting the environment to cause more defects or bugs into the system? And it's incredibly useful metric just to see whether or not you're shipping value or if you're shipping risky pieces of work. As part of our benchmarking, we see a strong ratio as 5 stories delivered to 1 bug raised. And what this typically tells us is that teams are shipping in a stable manner and their work is quite well tested. Typically, this also means that teams are following best practice in terms of breaking down stories into smaller pieces, or having better kind of testing coverage in their teams, clearer requirements, and essentially this leads to kind of less nasty surprises when it comes to the release as well, or post-release. In an example where you've got a ratio of 2 to 1, this can often be a sign that the quality is slightly slipping. So you want to start looking at those areas to make sure you are reducing the risk of bugs. So we may be maybe overloading stories, making them quite complex. So that definitely increases the risk when it comes to pushing them out into the production. We might be rushing some of this review cycles or not having clear enough requirements there, or skipping some proper validation checkpoints. And so this metric also kind of helps you spot trends over time. So you can see it's kind of a graph of over time, and you can see whether or not some of the features that have been pushed into the environment have caused a spike in bugs as well. And so it's quite nice to see them on one page, and we'll jump into kind of Plandek and show you how to build that out as well. So importantly, it kind of pushes the right behaviors. So trying to make sure that we're catching the issues early before they hit production to support some of your teams in delivering better quality outputs. And finally, our last metric. So this is around the bugs resolved, bugs raised ratio. Similar to the last one, it does talk to two different metrics being correlated together, but this one's all about managing the bug backlog. So it tells you how effectively a team is keeping up with the bugs that have been identified, and are we fixing the issues as fast as we're finding them. So a ratio, anything 1 or above, means that we are resolving bugs, more bugs than have been raised. So let's say, if this was 0.5, for example, it means that teams are slightly struggling, and it means that you're almost doubling your backlog, because for every kind of one story that's being resolved, 2 have been raised. And so it can quite quickly show you how quick your backlog, it can be doubling if it's not managed correctly. And so when these bugs start piling up, sometimes it's due to a lack of time for the team, maybe a lack of focus. People are strongly focused on that kind of value add work and haven't been keeping an eye on some of the bug backlog. And also maybe some inefficient resources. So actually, do you have enough people to be doing the testing in the phases, or pick up bugs as well? So do we have enough people to kind of manage the workload that's coming in? And then what's super powerful about this, it also shows you kind of sustained quality effort. So are the teams allocating time each sprint to fix bugs? So do we have a consistent level of bugs resolved across the metric, or are we seeing kind of huge spikes? So are teams deprioritizing bugs, fixing bugs for quite a while until they kind of come to it, maybe at the end of a month, at the end of a release, for example. And so in Plandek, you can kind of see these ratios and trends over time. And it's just about kind of understanding how your teams are handling their bugs. Have they got a good handle on the bug backlog, and making sure that's stable or even reducing down, so that your teams can kind of have that consistent performance and have healthier backlogs over time to kind of minimize the risk of bugs in the future. So hopefully that was helpful. I will jump into the tool now, into Plandek. So just give me a minute to share the next screen. But if you do have any questions as I'm walking through any of the tools, then please do drop them in the Q&A, which is open for us right now. Also, if you've got a minute or two, do jump into the poll and feel free to kind of fill that in for us. So hopefully now you can see my screen with Plandek. So what this is showing you, this is essentially our, well, it's essentially Plandek's own Plandek instance. So in fact, our delivery teams do love to use the tool for their own kind of performance, and also better kind of continuous improvement internally. What I've done here for us today is add a dashboard that talks to quality and some of the metrics that we've spoken about today. For those of you who are already on the tool, you'll be able to access this exact template and add it to your workspaces by hitting Manage Dashboard, going into Plandek templates here, and then looking for the quality dashboard or template. So you can just hit add, and that will add that to your instance. Now, these templates are configurable, so feel free to kind of play around with it, add some filters, and I'll show you kind of how to do that in a minute. But we also have, as you can see, focus, predictability, speed as well for templates. So you can also add those in if you are interested, and our other kind of masterclass sessions will be walking through those in more detail. So going into kind of bug resolution time. So this is providing, like I said, it's providing a view of how long do bugs take to get resolved in your system. And so in this case, we have 9.11 days. And then when we go into looking at this value, it shows how that's changed over time. So right now, since we're looking at a 12-week period, what this tells us is based on the previous 12-week period to now, we've actually increased by 12% on how long we take in resolving our bugs. So for any of these metrics, when you hit explore, you'll be able to start filtering and giving, changing the views into what you may want to see. Let's just give it a second to load here. So I can see some questions coming in. So let me just take a minute to address those. So I see one from Manny. Where is this information source? Jira. Yes, exactly. So what we can do in Plandek is bring in your ticket data. This can be through Jira, but also your ADO as well, if that's something you're using. Plandek's also not limited to kind of ticket data. We also pull in things like repository data and build data, which will show you some cool metrics regarding that and how that can support some of the quality metrics as well. Okay, I see another one. So we do bug tracking through Jira. How do we leverage Jira? So yes, like I said, these data points are coming directly from Jira. So Plandek essentially has connected their Jira into here. And so what we can see now is if I click into any of these data points, you'll start to recognize some of these ticket numbers. And so these have been pulled in from the Jira/ADO instance, whatever your teams may use. And you can actually click into these and it will take you to your actual Jira page. So it is leveraging that and it's bringing it into one kind of consistent platform. So you can start looking at the data and getting an extra level of granularity on your metrics. Okay. There's another question on how do you track the bug resolution time for low impact bugs that sits in the backlog due to the fact that ROI for the business is low and it's not worth investing time in? So yeah, that's a really good question, actually. It's something that I will jump into in a second. So I will get back to that one. But when we are just going back to the metric itself, when you add it to Plandek, you can see an overtime view. So this is telling me, right, like back in May, it was taking teams a lot longer to resolve their bugs, whereas now it's more consistently a lot shorter. So there is positive kind of story there in terms of what we can see in this metric. Now, when you add a metric, you will want to also make sure it's filtering for the correct Jira tickets or the correct work items that you're interested in. So what I've done here is I've filtered it for the issue type as bugs. And so I've included bugs, but you can also see there's things like incidents, defects. So I can also click these or exclude these depending on what I want the metric to show. And so when you're looking at kind of your other filters, you'll see that these are very similar, if not exactly the same as what you've got in your Jira and ADO. So these should be kind of familiar when you are on your own instance. And you can start clicking any of those. If I want to add a label, for example, I can do that here. So it's very configurable and you're able to kind of build it out based on the way you tag your tickets in Jira, for example. We also have an option for outliers. So right now we've put a 90% outlier on. What this means is the top 10 values are not included into the graph at the moment. And so why we do that is to give you a bit more of a normalized view so that the anomalies or the kind of extreme cases don't skew your data. And so when you're kind of trying to understand how long it typically takes a team for bug resolution time, this is a good way to do it and just make sure you're not getting any of those extreme values. For all our calculations, for all our metrics, you can adjust the calculation. So let's say there's certain statuses that your teams don't use. You can just hit exclude and click the ones that you don't want to include. And this will update the metric for you as well. So it's quite configurable in that sense. The details as well, just to show you quickly, you can change the name of this metric. So the base of this is a delivery time metric. What we've done is we've configured it to show us only bug delivery time. And so this is the bug resolution time here, but you can kind of update this as you like. With all of our metrics, we do have a small I button, which takes you to a help page, which is really handy when you just want to kind of refresh what the metrics telling you and how to kind of set it up into different use cases. Okay. So one thing I wanted to show you, and this kind of touches on the question earlier about the low impact bugs. So let's say on your Jira or your ADO, you have a priority label. And on that priority label, you are essentially tagging which ones are low priority, which ones are high. So how I can do that is just click Manage Breakdown, type in priority or whichever field I want to try. If you tick that in, it will show up as another tab. So if I just show you that quickly, this shows you exactly how long it takes for tickets that are high priority, normal, or low to be resolved in your system. Now, typically you do want to see the high priority ones have a shorter bug resolution time and the low priority ones to have a larger you expect them to have a slightly larger bug resolution time than the faster ones, because these are probably the more critical ones that you want to fix in your system. And so you can kind of start seeing trends on how teams are picking up the bug tickets and which ones they're prioritizing. Okay, there's another breakdown that I'll show you as well, which is really handy. So this is the breakdown by status. Now, these are based on the status columns we have in Jira or ADO. And what's quite nice is this breaks down exactly how long tickets take in each of these statuses. So I can start identifying what are my key bottlenecks in this kind of workflow. And so just looking at this very easily, you can tell that the awaiting refinement, the ready for dev, and the awaiting deployment in this case are taking me the longest for bugs. So then I can start asking the right questions to the right people to investigate why this is happening and also how we can kind of start mitigating for this and bringing that bug resolution time further down. Like I said, any of these bars you can click and you'll get a full list of tickets that contribute to that data point. You've got the days on average, and you can also explore statuses to see where that ticket's gone and where it is in the system at the moment. So super handy kind of view there. When you're looking at any of your metrics and you may want to use some of these for reporting purposes, you do have the option to export these charts out into an image, export the page, or just the table data at the bottom if you want the raw numbers. And then we've also got the date picker. So this is quite nice to, Plandek essentially defaults to the 12-week period, but if you want to look at a shorter 4-week period or customize your own dates, you can do that. And so this is quite nice when you've just had a release or when you've just had kind of a change in your ways of working and you want to see how the data compares before and after. This is a really cool way to do that as well. Okay. Let me just have a look at questions. So where is the bug resolution time dashboard found, as I'm unable to find this? So yes, if you do have Plandek, the bug resolution time metric, the easiest way to add it is, again, go through Manage Dashboards on your bottom left, find Plandek templates, and it's actually called the quality. So these are a number of metrics that look at quality and create like a full dashboard for you. Now, if you just want to add this metric separately to an existing dashboard you have, you will be able to click Add Metric here. And we've got like a list of maybe 45 odd metrics. And these are kind of very baseline metrics that you can configure. And the one that we use for bug resolution time is our kind of delivery time, lead time metric. So if I just in lead time, I can add that onto my dashboard and you'll see kind of the overtime view that I showed earlier, and just make sure you're filtering for the issue type of bugs. And suddenly that will kind of give you how long it takes for only the bugs to be resolved. So hopefully that answers your question. And how do you capture in Plandek if the team is picking priority bugs? So yeah, like I said, the best way to view that is the by priority, and you can also click into these so you can see how many tickets per priority have actually been picked in the system. So you can see if things are taking longer or shorter, or are people kind of prioritizing in the right way. Moving on to our next metric. So we did talk a bit about the completed stories to bugs raised ratio, and also the bugs raised to bugs resolved ratio. Now, what I put here is kind of the raw bare bones of the metrics. And what I'll show you how to do is kind of overlay these so you've got them all in one place. So let's start with the completed stories. So what this is showing me at the moment is showing me that there's 147 stories that this team has completed over the 12-week period we've got. And so you can see how that changes over time. And also you can make sure that you filtered correctly by looking at the filters here, adding issue type, and then also just making sure you've selected your stories. So you're just only looking at the completed stories at the moment. What I want to do now is add an overlay, and then I want to add how many bugs were raised. So when we're looking at bugs raised, we're looking at the base metric, which is created work. So if you click an overlay, you type in the metric you'd like to add, and this will give you basically the baseline. So now that we've got the created work metric, it's telling me all the tickets in my Jira or ADO that have been created. And what I want to do is now configure this to show me the raised bugs. So how I do that is click more filters, search for issue type field, and then go to bugs. So now if I click out of this, this should include only bugs for me. What you can also do is, so Plandek pulls in these default fields from your Jira ADO, but through kind of the settings in the background, when you have access, you can always bring in other fields as well, so custom fields. So there is really like an endless amount of kind of ways you can kind of configure the metrics you have. So now for this team, I've filtered for bugs, and I've seen the kind of created bugs. What I want to do now is rename this to be reflective of what we're actually looking at. So I'm looking at raised bugs. And then like we did with the other metric as well, I'm going to go into filters. Yeah, no, that's fine, I think. So raised bugs, we can see that we've got 86 at the moment in that 12-week period. What you can start seeing is these kind of times where there's more bugs that were raised than actually stories completed. And so you want to kind of figure out, is that because of the previous work that we've released into the environment? Is that because teams are less focused on that value add work and are working on other things at the moment? So it gives you an idea of how to kind of interrogate the data, but also find some correlations and trends that you can start talking to your teams about. So hopefully this is a helpful view for you guys as well. I'll just go back for a second. I think one thing I wanted to show you is our GenAI insight button. So we have this for metrics that are single metrics, not available for overlays at the moment. But if I click into that, it's actually a really good way of trying to understand what the metric's telling you. And also it gives you a bit of ideas on what are some of the risk factors, and also some recommendations on how you can mitigate some of those risks. So like you can see, this gives me a quick summary of what this metric's showing me for my team over the past 12 months. And it does include kind of all the filters, and it looks at kind of historical trends as well when it's trying to build out this view for you. So this is a really cool view of showing the chart, and you can also download this. Especially good for people who are just starting off and want to understand what the metric's telling me, and some kind of food for thought in terms of recommendations on where we can do, or how we can do next steps, essentially. Okay. Now, there's two other metrics here that come as part of the quality template, which we haven't touched on so far, but I did want to show you this because The first one is basically pulling on not ticket data this time, but it's pulling on your build pipeline data. So essentially, this is showing you that the build failure rate on the master pipeline. So if I go into explore, I can see that the build failure rate is about 24% for this team. And I can also see a breakdown. So I've added a breakdown by build pipeline. And I can see, right, these are the pipelines that are actually causing most of the build failures. And so when you're able to identify these trends or these kind of common hotspots, then you can start understanding, right, is this something we need to do in the way this is being tested or in the way things are being built in this pipeline? And then hopefully that kind of mitigates any risks for you and reduces the number of build failures when it comes to producing your work and pushing it through into production. So again, here we can filter by certain branches as well, because it's looking at your data. And for now, we've just looked at the master branch. So if I go out again, the second metric that I did want to show you is this one, so PR collaboration. It's quite a nice one for teams to understand how are people collaborating when we are running the PRs. So when we have a lot of lines going across the center and having a few of these white spaces, that means that the team's really good at collaborating and interacting with each other on each other's PR. So we're getting that knowledge exchange through that system. One of the other things to look out for is if people have a super large chunk of the pie. This just demonstrates to me that this person holds a lot of knowledge, and what you don't want to happen in the future is that kind of dependency on that person. So whether they go on leave, on holiday, or whether they kind of leave the company in the future, you also don't want that knowledge to go with them. So what we'd like to see is kind of that kind of equal or almost equal chunk of the pie for across the different participants in the PR. People with larger ones typically will be more those senior folks who are getting involved in more of those review cycles as well. But again, you can kind of use some of the filters to look at a specific team. So if you've got a list of authors, for example, etc., and you can look at the kind of specific repositories as well. Obviously, this is pulling straight from your repo data, whether that's GitHub, GitLab, etc. So I've just got a question on this. So what do the colored sections along the circle represent? Yes, so sorry, these are people in your team. So if I just highlight one of the colors, MJ, for example, is this individual here. And the lines going out and in, well, the lines going out, which are blue, are the PRs that he's involved in. And then you can see there's lines coming in from other people where, Richard, for example, has been as part of MJ's PRs as well. So it's kind of showing you who's talking to who in your team and how those kind of relationships are building. You can also see some people do have a lot of PRs where they've been the author and also the participant. So it highlights those things as well, because as part of best practice, we'd love to see kind of more people getting involved into each other's PRs and sharing that knowledge and sharing those review cycles. Okay, just looking to see if we have any other questions while we're on the product. But if not, I will just quickly jump back into the slides just for the final bit of this session. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see the slides now. So essentially with all of this, what we want to try and do is embed these practices into your teams and your ways of working, because the metrics alone won't actually help kind of fix quality, but what they will do is allow you to have those conversations with your teams, with your leaders, to identify maybe possible areas that you can investigate further in the future. So it's kind of embedding those practices and building a culture around continuous improvement. And so some ways you can do this is embedding it into your daily governance meetings, such as stand-ups in the morning, or in your retrospective views when you're looking at the data and the historical trends over the past few weeks. Also celebrating improvement. So when you have seen improvement, actually what has been working for your teams and what can we do more of to make sure we are reducing the risk or quality risks we've got in our system. And then finally, creating that shared ownership. So at Plandek, we do heavily believe in having that visibility on your metrics and making sure the team are also involved in working on the metrics themselves. So it kind of drives that ownership throughout the kind of organization and also pushes for that kind of continuous improvement culture. So as a whole, what we try and do is make Plandek kind of super configurable for you guys to make sure that you are tailoring it for your engineers, for your leads, for your execs, and also QA teams, etc. So it is a product that can be used for multiple use cases. It's not only putting for the ticket data, like I mentioned, but also your repository and build data. And so this is kind of giving you that full picture of teams and the delivery. Normally, as a delivery lead or a team lead, you may not have that insight into your repository or your build data. So having that kind of lens into it can help you ask better questions from your engineering teams. And then also, when that happens, when you're kind of having these conversations, quality starts to become embedded in the way you work and how your teams start thinking about productivity. So I think that's mostly it for me today. Just as a reminder, we do have the poll that is still live. So if you haven't already, please do take a minute to jump in and register your interest. We do have that kind of no obligations free trial going on at the moment. Or if you just want to book in for a demo session to see the product yourself, you're more than welcome to. And if you fill in the poll, someone will reach out to you. I'll stay for a minute just if there's any kind of final questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining the session today, everyone. I hope you found it useful, and I do look forward to seeing you in our future webinar. Thanks, everyone.